Welcome to another episode of Capital H. Today I'm joined by Sharath, Vice President at Everest Group, and we are together live from Unleash America, end of day 2. It's been a lot of energy, a lot of excitement, and a lot of conversation around the topic of transformational shifts that are facing enterprises today. And one of those that has been enduring for a few years is what organizations are doing related to skills and skills intelligence. Also evolution in the year around work intelligence, task intelligence, et cetera. And so Sharath and the team at Everest Group have done some incredible research around how AI and data-driven skills platforms are helping organizations really reimagine their workforce strategy and drive some incredible business and human outcomes for their workers, for their organizations. So today we're really going to dig into some information that enterprises need to know. So Sharath, welcome. Can you just share a little bit about yourself, your background in the Everest Group, so folks who might not be familiar have an understanding of you and what you all do?
Thanks for having me, Kyle. And you got the pronunciation of my name right. So kudos to
Test
that.
one.
Kudos on that. Yeah, so Everest Group, we have been around for 34 years, I believe. We were founded in 1991. We have offices across the globe. I'm based in Bangalore, where we have a lot of my team members as well. So from my perspective, my team tracks HR tech and services, both across HR, skills, people analytics, HR service delivery, candidate engagement, as well as a contingent workforce as well, right? Technologies like vendor management systems, freelancer management systems, and so on. So we bring in that 360-degree perspective of how organizations think about talent, not just from a permanent talent perspective, but also from contingent talent, but also not just on tech, but tech plus services. So that's the vantage point that we bring to the table.
Yeah, fantastic. And I got to say, thank you again for joining us because, folks, he is fresh off 29-hour journey from Bangalore to Las Vegas for this conversation. So thrilled that you were able to kind of fit some time into your agenda. So let's dig in. Obviously, the skills topic has been around for a few years at this point, but there's been a tremendous amount of investment into the space, a bunch of new companies that have come up, companies that have added skills to their capabilities. And in the last several months, because of the AI and automation focus, it's almost like a renewed emphasis on skills. What are 3 or 4 of the things that you've seen in your research that you really think that some of the HR and business leaders out there need to focus on as this category continues to evolve?
Yeah, it's a great question, Kyle. We have been hearing about skills-based hiring and skills-based organization for a long time. Even before some of these providers came into the space, skills was still a very hot topic, right? Of course, you can't go out in the market and hire somebody who doesn't have the skills to do the job, right? So since the 1990s or early 2000s, people have been doing some form of skills-based hiring or skills-based L&D.
Yeah, and maybe it was just called a competency model or something else, right? Because to your point, like you can't hire for people who don't have skills.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
right?
Sounds simple.
But the reason why this has gained more popularity in the recent times is because the technology is enabling organizations to make it real. Second is there have been few companies that have become a little bit more mature and they are sharing their stories on how they got it done. And also the general push around AI, which is again changing the way we look at things. So people are recognizing or realizing the fact that they can't just stand still and wait for things to happen. They have to make things happen. So again, skills is becoming one of those levers to make the things happen. So I think that's where the resurgence is happening with skills. But in terms of, let's say 3-4 things that I'm really excited about in 2025, one is definitely AI and what it has in store for all of us. Second is the whole new category emergence on work intelligence, or how you would think about the future of work from a task-based lens. The third one is definitely how organizations can embrace skills-first strategies and how that ties into the task-based point of view as well. Then the other shift that I'm excited to know more about is around workforce planning. Because at the end of the day, if things are changing at a rapid pace, you need to plan for the future. Previously, what used to happen was you used to do workforce planning once a year and then you dust your hands off. But given the pace of change, you can't do that. You need more regular and dynamic workforce planning. And that has to take into consideration both skills and tasks and the work that needs to be done. So that's a third or fourth thing that I'm interested in. And the last one is, which I'm really bullish about, is this movement from change management philosophy to change mindset. So previously, we always used to think about change management as a response to a change. And it's like 3 months project or 6 months project, change management. And you'll have a bunch of communications flyers going out to the employees. Hey, this has changed and this is what it is. But ever since 2020, every year there has been some massive change.
Understatement. Yeah.
So you can't prepare for change when the changes happen or when the change is happening. You need to be prepared even before it. So for that, there are 3-4 things that organizations need to do to have the change mindset in place. So I think these are some of the things that I'm researching on and excited about.
I love that. And there's so much we can dig into with each of those. So because this is the one that I think has started to really gain prominence in some of the news within the human capital HR ecosystem, task intelligence, work intelligence, let's dig into that, right? So I think everyone is acknowledging you cannot put AI and automation on top of existing processes and achieve the goal, right? We fundamentally have to re-engineer work, redesign work in a different way. And that requires a task-based view of roles, right? Well, what do people actually do on a day-to-day basis, right? And that's at a lower level than the skills that they use on a day-to-day basis. So can you share a little bit about how does this task-based view differ from some of the traditional things that people were using to kind of group job families or functions or roles into things? And what do you think that means relative to where organizations need to get smart quickly to then maybe be able to capitalize on the promise of things like a skills-first approach or an AI and automation investment?
Yeah, great loaded question, Kyle.
There's a lot there. There's a lot there.
Right? So let's say somebody asks you, what do you do on a day-to-day basis? You will give some answer. Let's say that person asks your colleague, what does Kyle do on a day-to-day basis? Both the answers will be totally different. So unless you know what is the actual work that is... So this is for one person, right? Imagine you multiply
that 100,000, 10,000.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So at the end of the day, you get in hypotheticals. Okay, I think that he is doing that, right? So nobody has any visibility on what is being done. And at the end of the day, you can, when you think about skills, one thing is, what are the skills needed to execute the job today? And then second thing is, what are the skills needed to execute the job next year or tomorrow, for that matter, right? So unless you know what activities need to be done or what is the outcome that you're trying to derive or drive, you don't know what your skills are or what skills you need to hire for or develop. So understanding the work that needs to be done or the outcomes that you need to drive and breaking that down into tasks or subtasks or actual activity that you're doing, that will help organizations get a better understanding of the truth. And like you mentioned, if you expand it to the entire organization, that's a lot of data points, a lot of understanding about how things are happening. So for example, if someone is in a manufacturing firm, let's say car manufacturing firm, manufacturing diesel engines or diesel cars, right? So the skills needed to do that is going to be totally different from, let's say next year they make a pivot.
Sure.
And they say, we are only going to manufacture EV cars.
Yeah.
So the skills
it's a less complex engine, right? It is a different set of skills.
So the tasks that need to be done to build an EV car is going to be totally different from a diesel car. So then the skills needed will be different. You have to train people based on the work that needs to be done, right? So let's say your job architecture does not change. You still have diesel engine mechanic as one of the job designations right now. You can't keep on training that person on something that is not going to be relevant, right? So you need to change that to match with the work that needs to be done. So, and that has downstream impact as well.
Sure.
One is changing the job architecture at an individual role level. Second could be combining two job roles into one because certain activities can be automated or can be done by AI, right? So then some of those other activities can be combined and job roles could be collapsed or merged. Third could be, let's say, from a cost reduction standpoint or cost optimization standpoint, there are a lot of ways to optimize the way you manage your talent, right? Instead of hiring two people, you can just hire one person to do these set of tasks because the rest is taken over by AI. And then you have collapsed the two job roles. So there are like multiple downstream impact on skills, on L&D, on hiring, on analytics, performance, payroll, so on and so forth. So understanding work and marrying that with skills is going to be extremely critical.
Yeah. For a long time, I think companies always would say, don't let technology drive your business decisions, right? Start with what is your business strategy? Therefore, what do you want to do from an operating model perspective? Do you organize around product or geography or customer segment or whatever it may be? And then what are the roles and the team structures and all those things, right? And then configure the technology to support that. Now, I think in terms of what you shared, you have to have an understanding of as you deploy AI and automation, what is the impact on the work? And if the work is changing, what skills do you need as I work my way up? And if I need fewer of those skills and more of those skills, now what does that mean for the roles? Now what does that mean for the team? Right now, what does that mean is start from the bottom and work its way up. So I'd be really interested, right? Like organizations still, right, having kind of a skills first strategy, a skills first priority. How do you think about this introduction of task-based view? And what does that then mean for how you can be skills first or be a skills-based organization while acknowledging kind of like the interplay between those two things?
So at the end of the day, task is one form of data. Skills is another form of data. So at the end of the day, you have to be data first. So you can marry the two information and then you can take decisions on that. That's as simple as that.
Yeah.
Right. But the problem is, how do you get the data?
Sure.
Right? And how do you trust the data that you get? So fundamentally, when I look at all the organizations that I'm talking to, both from the vendor side as well as the organizations that are actually implementing some of these things,
Yep.
currently the work or task-based view is still in nascency, I would say, right? So primarily people are looking at, hey, what is the work that needs to be done right now based on the job description that I have and based on what people have been doing for so long, based on tribal knowledge.
Yeah.
These are the skills that I need, and I need to identify who has the right skills for that and evaluate them on the proficiency levels needed for that role at this point in time. And then they're doing a lot of implementations and work on that. But at the end of the day, a lot of organizations falter in this journey because they're not able to see the right ROI, right? One of the reasons is most common reason I hear from organizations is nobody fills their own skills in their portal. Right? Either their HCM or any specialized solution they have. Nobody logs in and changes their skills on a day-to-day basis or a monthly or quarterly basis even, right? So a lot of organizations are facing challenges in actually, okay, they have good data, they have good systems in place, but the adoption rate is low and they're not able to see ROI. So as long as organizations can use the information in their day-to-day processes, embed skills-based logic that marry the actual work that needs to be done and the outcomes that a particular person needs to deliver, then they will start to see ROI. And only then you can sort of expand within the organization. You will get more comfort in the fact that you have invested so much time, effort, money in building this ecosystem. Because people are impatient, I would say, right? So once you...
Understatement again,
once you don't see any ROI on certain initiatives, you move on to the next one. But there is so much value in being skills-based. And this is one of the ways that you can make it a success is when you bring in that work angle into the mix.
Got it. Okay. All right. And so both of those things link to one of the other topics that you said you're really focused on right now is how does workforce planning change, right? Because if I've got an understanding of the tasks and task impacts, how are skills changing? How do I have a more dynamic view of skills? You said workforce planning has to stop being a annual only thing, right? How does it become continuous, dynamic? How is it evolving over the course of the year, week, month, quarter, as all these changes are going? So can you share a little bit about like how you're seeing organizations shift their approach on workforce planning and how they might be leveraging bringing some of that skills data and insights into their workforce planning tools in a new and different way?
Absolutely. So like we discussed, change is all around us. Change is not going to stop. So what that means is you can't go into an year saying that, hey, I'm going to need X amount of people and then be okay with it. Because you don't never know what's going to happen. You might get a new president. You might end in a geopolitical situation. You might be in war. I don't know what can happen.
I mean, the last 5 years, anything that people could have anticipated was almost like in play, right? Like I had a colleague who told me that in like 2018, 2019, she was like, if you're doing strategic thinking, big scenarios, what might happen that you never anticipate? The colleague's like, yeah, what about a global pandemic? And everyone's like, no, we don't need to worry about that. And 2 years later, we did, right? And so there's so many things that continue to happen that you can't leave a static plan to account for like these massive shifts.
Absolutely. Which brings me to my point, right? So you can't have a static workforce planning. It has to be extremely dynamic,
Yep.
right? And in this current business environment, everybody is trying to navigate it and identify new ways to innovate and new ways to do things,
Yep.
right? So you might enter a new geography, you
Yep.
might bring out a new product, you might bring in more AI into your operations,
Yep.
so on and so forth, right?
Yep.
So these things you can't expect to take a decision once a year. So there needs to be a more dynamic and continuous workforce planning.
Yep.
And I see some providers, some tech vendors investing in some of these capabilities to enable managers take this in a more continuous manner. And when you integrate this with skills intelligence, you can actually figure out whether I should buy, build, borrow, or use a bot. Right?
Yeah.
So the 4Bs. Different organizations have different, build, buy, borrow terminology, but the fourth angle is again what can be done by AI. So once you have this dynamic planning and then you marry work and tasks with the skills that are needed, you can actually take a decision on, do I really need to hire someone or can an AI do this for me? So when you have that view, you become a more resilient and agile organization, right? And like we mentioned, change is always there. So you need to build a muscle around being more resilient, right? And some of this dynamic workforce planning will really help organizations to respond quickly to market shifts.
Yeah. Well, and the resiliency point, gets to your comment earlier around change mindset, not change management, right? And it actually ties to one of the things that we introduced in our Human Capital Trends report this year was this concept of stagility, which was a word we created to bring together stability and agility, right? And how can you help workers be comfortable in a stable career that is based on agile movement, agile changes of work, right? And because you are agile, because you have a change mindset, you're able to navigate the twists and turns of the world, technology, whatever the factor may be, right? I'd love to hear, a little bit of your perspective on like, what are some of the things you're seeing for like, how are leaders and managers and workforces trying to evolve and adapt? And what does it look like to have that change mindset?
From our perspective, true resilience does not happen during the time of change. It happens before. So there are 3-4 things that I would encourage organizations to do to make this shift. So one is promote a growth mindset. So that means fail fast, learn fast, you experiment, you learn from the failures, pick yourself and go into the next one. Right? That's one. Second is, I would say, foster a sense of community and trust within the organization. So if every employee is bought into a common idea, then they'll strive to make it happen. So during times of change, that is what is needed. You can't have people turning on each other. And this sense of community and trust needs to be built even before some of these things happen. So you need to start now. The third one is you have to empower leaders at all levels. It's not just about giving the senior leadership the power. It's also about middle management and frontline managers as well. Because things happen pretty fast when you're in a state of flux. So you need to have people who can respond quickly and you need to give them the autonomy and the power to do that, right? And you also need to enable them with the right, tech, processes, systems, and so on and so forth, right? Last is, I would say, invest in building the right skills. For example, all employees need to be versatile in times of change. Your standard course of action may not work. So are you adaptable and flexible to make things happen with whatever resources you have at your disposal?
And I think to that end, like the World Economic Forum has said, I think 9 of the top 10 skills are human skills, like curiosity, creativity, decision-making, and those types of skills can help you be adaptable, be versatile, right? And help you, they tie to a growth mindset, right? You can't have a growth mindset if you are not curious, right? If you are not creative. Interesting. That makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, these are, I would say, 3-4 things that you should, as organizations, you need to think about and you need to figure out a way to do all these things right away. Right? I would say these are like immediate action items so that you're prepared for the future.
Yeah. Well, Sharath, we've covered a fair bit relative to this new category of task intelligence, why that's important to think about relative to work reengineering. why both of those ultimately help kind of reinforce the skills first strategies that many organizations have been adopting and are still progressing with. And also why it becomes that much more of an impetus for organizations to continue to shift to a more continuous workforce planning approach to driving a widespread change mindset perspective throughout the organization. But maybe one or two more questions that would be helpful. You, in your skills intelligence research, covered a wide array of vendors, right? What would you share with the leaders out there that would say, hey, here's a thing to think about as you consider this vendor ecosystem and potentially what an organization might look for in engaging a vendor to help them on their skills journey?
Yeah, I was really excited to kick off this study last year because there are so many vendors in this space that any 2x2 or XY graph won't do justice to the hard work that people are putting in the space, right? That's just want to call that out in the beginning itself.
Yeah.
And it's extremely difficult to classify these vendors and evaluate them on the same metrics as well.
But it's a starting point.
It's a starting point. Right? So that's one of our unique differentiators is that we are early to the market in a lot of these cases, but we go pretty deep in some of these areas as well. So one of the questions that we typically get is, or when we published the report that we got was, can you really compare a provider X with provider Y?
Sure.
Because the use cases that they deliver are totally different. One provider might be doing some talent acquisition use case. One might be internal talent marketplace for that matter. Our point of view is twofold here, maybe threefold. We'll have to see once I get to the answer. So one is when we are evaluating any sort of peak matrix assessment, we are looking at from the enterprise point of view. We're putting ourselves in the shoes of the organization, trying to understand, hey, if I'm facing skills problem, who are those vendors I need to reach out to? It's not about a talent acquisition problem, not a talent management problem.
Right.
Skills problem. One of the criteria that you need to satisfy to be included is, can you help the organization understand the skills that are there? Now, this could be at an individual level. This could be at a team level. This could be at a job designation, job role level. So, of course, there might be different organizations who may want to start with, hey, I just want to understand what are skills there in my organization based on the job designations that I have. So just have a taxonomy, map it out with your current job architecture, and then you build it up, aggregate it. So certain organizations that we've talked to have taken that approach, right? Certain organizations want to understand skills at an extremely granular level as well, right? I want to understand what is the proficiency level for each skill for each employee. So there are certain vendors for that as well. So of course, it's difficult to have different evaluations for different types of providers. But we have considered all those as part of this assessment. That is one, right? So we are trying to put ourselves in the shoes of the enterprise, think, hey, I have a skills problem. I can start from anywhere. Who should I look at? Second is, a lot of organizations that we have talked to, they have very disparate skill strategies. So talent acquisition might have a different tech platform and a different strategy, whereas an L&D or performance may have a different strategy.
Absolutely.
Right? So one of the call to action that we would like to give to organizations is think about it from an integrated decision-making perspective. So that different teams don't follow different approaches.
The last thing you need is 3 different vendors that were selected by 3 different teams who now have 3 different taxonomies.
Exactly.
How do you bring it all together?
Got it. So if we were to do an evaluation for, hey, skills intelligence focused on TA, you might have a different set of vendors. But then when you do a similar evaluation for TM, talent management, you may have a different set of vendors. So as an organization, should you go with 2 providers for these 2 use cases? Or should you think about integrating the business processes, the logic, and then try to figure out a provider who can solve both? You also have to keep in mind the existing tech stack in your organization. Do you have an HCM? Do you have another system already in place? And whether they can do the job, whether they have the functionality to expand and sort of do the job, right? So 2-3 different things we have taken into account so that we provide a more holistic picture. Of course, there are a lot of providers that have not been featured because the space is still evolving, right? There are a lot of amazing providers that we have come across who may not have participated in the research, or maybe we were not aware of them at that time, right? But we have interacted with later on. So stay tuned. We'll have more research on this. We may have new vendors, new interesting data, new interesting insights as well.
Okay, awesome. Sharath, this has been just such an incredible conversation. Thank you for sharing the insights. I would not have believed you were fresh 29 hours off the flight from India with how you've tackled these topics. So thank you again for joining us. But before we wrap up, one final question. So for HR leaders trying to navigate like what's happening to these categories, these changes that are being driven by a lot of the AI and automation capabilities that continue to be rolled out, while also keeping people at the center? Like, what's a piece of advice that you would offer to our listeners?
Again, three things, right? So one is start with purpose.
Sure.
Any new investment that you're doing, try to understand what are the business and workforce outcomes.
Yeah.
Right? So don't go after the next shiny thing.
Yep.
You may have to because it might provide you with exponential value or it could drive exponential business outcomes. Then definitely go ahead.
But don't chase the shiny thing just to chase it.
Just to chase it, right? So start with the purpose, right?
Yep.
Second one I would say is a lot of organizations leapfrog the hard things. So I would say build the right foundations, whether it is on data, infrastructure, having a governance layer in place. So this will ensure that the organizations get long-term value. Of course, when you implement something new, maybe you get value in the short term, but later on, it doesn't sustain. So invest in building the right data, right architecture, right infrastructure, governance, and before scaling any initiative. Right. Last one is keep your people at the center. Human potential is still the biggest X factor in play. And taking some inspiration from the change mindset, they are the ones who are gonna drive organizations through change using technology.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, Sharath, thank you again for joining and for sharing all your insights today. And to our Capital H listeners, stay tuned for more conversations on the future of work, strategy, and human potential. And check out Sharath and the team at the Everest Group, the research they've been doing, the insights they've been sharing above and beyond this category of skills intelligence. There's a wealth of knowledge that you can access. And stay tuned for more live from Unleash.
This podcast is produced by Deloitte. The views and opinions expressed by podcast speakers and guests are solely their own and do not reflect the opinions of Deloitte. This podcast provides general information only and is not intended to constitute advice or services of any kind. For additional information about Deloitte, please go to deloitte.com/about.